All right. So we're currently in week 6 and it should be recording right now. Yep. So as we know, you've seen the announcement and you may have worked through it already. If you haven't, we have a quiz this week. So the first thing to review will be the list that I recently posted, and you may have been able to use this to study a little bit already. But if we go to the announcements, we've got week 6 with the quiz here. So before we start talking through course content, we'll go through a little bit of a PowerPoint. I just want to walk through this list and make sure that we're all on the same page regarding what this means and what we need to be studying. So the first part here will be addiction, and particularly those neurological and chemical aspects of addiction. What do illicit substances, particularly drugs, psychoactive drugs, do to our systems, to our minds, and to our bodies? So obviously I can't say to you, oh, here's what the quiz question is, but I hope that this list helps you as you review the assigned text and as you review the other resources in Blackboard in preparation for the quiz if you've not taken it already. So we're looking at those psychoactive drugs and what they can do to our brains and to our bodies. Obviously, addiction needs a biopsychosocial approach, which we've worked on a little bit in class and will continue to do so. But for this quiz, we're really focused in on that physiological, neurological component. Those who are here on the video, please, if you have a comment or want to ask about something, chime in, just feel free to interrupt me, no problem. But the next bullet point here is social connection, sympathy, empathy. So we need to make sure that we've got the difference down between those two. I see your thumbs up, thanks. So I hope that the thumbs up means we're good to go. That's wonderful. I love those little Zoom features. Sympathy and empathy, obviously the difference between these two, if we're thinking about topics of compassion in general. Sympathy, I'm feeling sorry for you. Empathy, maybe I've been where you are, or I've been through something similar and I'm really taking your perspective. So it's kind of the difference between I'm sorry for you and I feel for you. I feel where you are and what you're going through, and I understand and I'm here with you. You're not alone. So a way that we might consider this or word this is that empathy would be a deeper and perhaps more meaningful, more helpful approach to sympathy as a more basic phenomenon. So empathy could be a deeper layer of sympathy. Human sexual maturation and hormonal changes. So think about menopause, for instance, anything that you run into in the text that relates to those hormonal processes for humans as they grow. And that'll be in the chapters that we're focused on for the quiz in particular. So I'm going to click real quickly here, go back to the quiz. Remember, the assignment description for the quiz tells us after reviewing chapters 4 and 9, you'll complete the quiz. So the content, the bulk of it that you need is going to be presented to you there. And obviously just keep going through the course content for each of the tabs in Blackboard. Types of intelligence. So when we're looking at cognitive approaches, we want to make sure that we can address those accurately and define them. Sleep stages and disorders. So we know like the REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and the surrounding stages. Those are good to learn and take some notes down. It's okay to use notes on your quiz. That's fine. Just make sure that you're learning the content, and note taking is a part of that. But it is timed, as you know. So just make sure that you're prepared before you get started, or else you might struggle with running out of time. Parenting styles. So what is the approach of the parent? Is it more authoritarian? Is it more permissive? What impact might that have on the child? And what does that parenting style look like in practice? Okay. Memory disorders related to aging. So we think about dementia and different types of memory loss and what might occur cognitively for a person who is older in particular. Subliminal messaging in advertisement. So how might the media or different advertising sources manipulate our minds a little bit and kind of get into that subconscious and encourage us to purchase the product or to pursue the activity that they're trying to promote with that advertisement. Finally, chemicals that mimic neurotransmitters in the brain. So we'll just keep studying with that neurological, physiological approach in mind, kind of the biological side of psychology. And that's a really important part of the field and of study. And then as we proceed into more of our course content, we'll see with that biopsychosocial approach, psycho would be psychological, biological. And with the psychological side, we're thinking about mental health. We're thinking about perspective. Hi, Scott. How are you? I think Scott's just connecting right now. Scott, if you have any trouble hearing us, can you hear us? And Scott, feel free to type in the chat as well. It's good to have you here. I just want to make sure that you can hear as we're going along. We are recording right now. We were talking about what we're studying for the week 6 quiz. So down on the chemicals that mimic neurotransmitters. In this course, that's more of the biological side, but with the biopsychosocial approach, that psychological side is going to be really with the psyche, which is where that word comes from, mental health and our emotions. And we'll hit on some of that, especially in the coming weeks. And then finally with biopsychosocial, social obviously is the final part. And we know that word that has to do with our relationships and our interactions with others and some of those group dynamics, helping behaviors. And behavior really is both psychological and social and also biological, frankly. So it all ties together. But when we're looking at the chemicals that mimic the neurotransmitters in the brain or the sexual maturation and the hormonal changes, many of these, the psychoactive drugs, their effects on the body, these would be on the biological side of that biopsychosocial approach. And then finally, gender norms in society. So anything you can gather from what you're reading about gender and expectations in society for men or for women, that'll be another area to brush up on too. Any comments or questions before we proceed? And Scott, feel free to pop in the chat if you're able to hear us and just let us know or speak up. Emma, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. You said that it's okay if we use our notes for the quizzes?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, go for it.
Awesome.
Yeah, honestly, it's fairly, and it depends where you go. So I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. But in college level classes, it's fairly common to have open note assessments. And that's because many college classes are less of a test of what you can memorize and more of a test of how you use your resources and research. Because ultimately, if we're proceeding into graduate school or to higher level college coursework, that's going to be a really heavy research base, no matter what field you're in. So it's a good practice opportunity for that and kind of a work smarter, not harder. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. No stress. I don't want you guys to feel stressed. So remember, the quizzes, they can be tricky. It's hard to know what's coming. My hope is that this list helps us. And please know that the quizzes are only kind of a small portion of your grade in comparison to some of these other assignments. So even if you get a lower score than you'd like on a given quiz, we still have lots of opportunities. In week 7, we have a discussion, and the topic for that will be assumptions, things that you have assumed and have been perhaps wrong about, or how you've overcome that perception. So we're back on the topic of perception there. Upcoming for us in week 8. Oh, this one I do want to talk through before we go to our little PowerPoint. So this is the week 8 journal abstracts assignment. And before we talk about that, I want to talk about the final paper, because right after this in week 9, you'll have the opportunity to submit your topic for your final paper. So I'm going to hit on the final paper now and then go back to the journal abstracts, because we can connect the two and it makes life a lot easier if you choose to do that. You don't have to. The week 15 final paper. So it's down the road, but it'll come faster than we realize. This is due on the final day of the final week of our class, week 15. And this paper is really a pretty open door for you. So as you keep reading, as you keep studying, know that we have approaching this 5 to 6 page research paper. And this will be for a topic of your choice. It has to be something that we've covered in the course. So really, basically anything in your course text is a free game for you. Most people, when they study really any topic, there may be something that stands out to them as, wow, that was really interesting, or I was really into that, and I want to know more. It could be something like, I've seen a lot of students for this paper do things like mental health, a particular condition or disorder. So maybe types of anxiety disorders, and then they would dive into treatment options, medication, therapeutic approaches, and then tying in obviously the biblical perspective, which is essential. We're going to conclude with that no matter what your topic is. Pull in that scripture, especially as you end the paper. Some people have done the concept of aggression and violence in society, or prejudice, discrimination, some of those more social broad concepts. Some people have done maybe a type of personality disorder that they want to research further. Lots of people tap into that substance abuse component, and they like to research maybe drug abuse or alcohol abuse and relevant treatment options, and what the projections or outcomes may be for a person who's having those problems. So there's all sorts of stuff that can be really fascinating. And that's what we're doing for the final week of class. And the reason we're talking about it right now is because, as I said, in week 9, you'll be submitting your proposed paper topic and a rough thesis statement. And then I'll be going through and providing approval for those. Okay. So if it feels a little too broad when I see it, or maybe a little too narrow, and we need to expand so that we can find enough research to support it and to address it, I'll provide you with clear feedback on your topic as quickly as possible in week 9 after you submit it at the end of week 9. So it'll be week 10 that you're hearing back about that. The reason that this ties back to week 8, the journal abstracts, is because this is an assignment that can closely connect to your final paper. So you don't have to do what I'm about to say, but I do encourage you to consider it. In week 8, we need to select 3 scholarly peer-reviewed full-text journal articles. These are 3 research studies from the CCU online library. You know that on the course dashboard, there is an introductory website for use of the CCU online library. And I'll show you if you just go to dashboard, more announcements, scroll down, 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 down. You're looking for these books. And it's a YouTube video. It's like roughly 10, 15 minutes. So if you're not familiar or you'd like more information, that's where you can go. And you need to find 3 academic journal articles. And the video that I just showed you on the course dashboard will walk you through how to find those. And that'll be for this week 8 assignment, because after you get them, you're going to write abstracts for each of those. So it'll be 3 different abstracts for 3 different journal articles, summarizing each one. So you can do 3 pages for this, for the abstracts themselves. And then you will include a cover title page and a reference page. So you can go title page, first page is 1 abstract, second page is 2 abstracts, third page is 3 abstract. So 3 different articles summarized, and then a reference page where all 3 of your journal articles are cited in that reference page in APA format. The abstract is basically summarizing the content. It needs to be in your own words, but you can cite in APA format as appropriate, just like you always do in research writing. These are the sections that we have to cover in the abstract. It's going to be between 150 and 250 words long. So roughly, I would say like a solid paragraph. It comes out to maybe half a page, depending upon what you're writing. You can use online word counts, or if you work in Microsoft Word or even Google Docs, there are features that can count your words. So you want to hit right between 150 and 250. If you go slightly over, that's okay, but don't go under, because under 150 is not going to be enough depth of analysis. And when you write these abstracts, you want things that are research studies, experiments with variables and participants, and you need to do the intro, the methods, the results, and the discussion for full credits on these abstracts. So the intro is, what is your article even about? Introduce it. The methods, what did the researchers do in this research study? The results, what did they come up with? And then the discussion. The discussion, I'll say this here on this video, and you can keep it in your mind or take a note down about it. Discussion sections in research are all about the big picture and what this means to us. Okay, so you can do all sorts of research studies and say, yeah, okay, that's cool, that's interesting, but why do we care? It's kind of the so what of a research summary. And that's what we can do with this discussion. So after you discuss what came from the research study, what did the researchers find, you can say this research is valuable or important for society because it shows us that we can implement this or that, or funding could be channeled towards whatever initiative you might identify as useful. And it can just be depending on your topic. So what you can do for these abstracts, because you might be thinking, how will I select an article? Some people like to pick 3 random articles about 3 random topics and use it for exploration. That's fine. As long as you do 3 academic journal articles, you're good to go. Okay. But what most people do and what they often find very helpful is choosing 3 academic journal articles, peer-reviewed, full text, that relate to the final paper topic that they want to submit for week 9. That's because this way they're already starting their research, and this gives them a really good head start when they begin to compose their outline and their final product for the major research paper, which will be due at the end of week 15. So like I said, if you want to pick random topics and figure out your final paper topic later, that's fine. But it is a way to make your life a little bit easier by starting to research now. The content of your abstracts cannot be copied and pasted into your final paper because that would be self-plagiarism. So you'll have to create new work. But what you can do is take your knowledge of the articles that you used for this abstract assignment and integrate that and summarize that and cite those articles as sources in your final paper, and you'll already be familiar with them. So it does make the road a little bit more straightforward for you in that research process. So that's the main idea about the journal abstracts, and that'll be coming up for us in week 8. We're almost done with week 6. So now's a good time to at least start thinking about it. Any questions on those assignments? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit here about theories of emotion, which is a topic that we'll be approaching later in our course. We have roughly 10 minutes remaining. So I just want to talk about emotion as we're going to be diving into it in this class. Like I said, with the biopsychosocial approach, we've hit a lot on the chemical aspects and biological components, health-related components of human functioning and psychology, some of those medication concepts and neurological concepts, and that's a really important foundation. But when we move into the psychological and the social components in the field of psychology, that's that biopsychosocial, those 2 final aspects. Emotion's a big part of that. And emotion is something that we all experience, like it or not. It can be very pleasant or it can be very difficult. And there are all sorts of ways that we can respond to emotion. So I want to ask if anybody on the call is willing to share, and if not, we can move past it. But what do you notice impacts your emotions or your attitude throughout the day? And that's just one question for us before we proceed. Does anybody have any input regarding that?
Usually how much I have left to do and whether I get it done or not.
Totally. Yeah. So stress. Thank you, Isaac. That makes a lot of sense. Workload. I feel the same. When we don't get done what we need to get done, or if we do it rather poorly, or if we feel behind, we might start having some of that negative self-talk and not even noticing those thoughts as they start to swirl around. Oh, you're not doing a good job. You're going to do badly or fail. And that can lead us to guilt and all sorts of negative feelings and frustration and sadness and fatigue. And then we might not even want to try. So I appreciate you saying that, Isaac. That makes a lot of sense. If we get our work done, we might feel really positively and we might feel confident and proud and good about ourselves. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I was honestly just going to say what Isaac said. Stress is just what you still have to get done is definitely a contributor to how you feel and how you're going to act.
Totally. Yes. So Emma, would you say if you finish your tasks for a given day, which kinds of emotions do you notice emerge for you?
I mean, nervousness because I haven't gotten the grade back, but also relief that it's done and all that studying and stuff is over.
Yeah.
And you can start a new week off without having to study for a test.
Totally. Yep, absolutely. So that relief maybe combined with some anxiety or nervousness, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, guys. I love that because I get weary of listening to myself talk. So thank you for sharing. So there are a lot of theories. This is a theory that comes from Ekman. This is around the 1970s. We'll talk through a few theories of emotion now, and you'll read into a lot of this in your text as we proceed in the course. But this theory, types of basic emotions, there are 6 in this theory. And this theorist named Ekman identified happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise as the major or basic emotions for humans. And this might come to mind for you as ringing a bell for the movie Inside Out. If any of you saw it, that's what it makes me think of a little bit. And then later on, he added several like pride, shame, embarrassment, excitement, and decided that it was a little more complicated than this. There are many different theories about where emotion comes from. So my challenge to you all would be this week, as you experience emotions, which we know we will, whether that's sadness or frustration and anger or happiness or anything else, think about where is that emotion coming from? What do you think is causing it? And what is maintaining it or changing it throughout the day for you? So somebody coming from a physiological approach would have the theory that emotion comes from a response within the body. So the idea that, let's say that we encounter a stimulus that causes us anxiety or fear. So if we see a bear, right? That's just a random example. But let's say a better, more practical example is if the car in front of us hits the brakes really fast, and then we have to hit the brakes really fast in order to avoid a collision. That's a horrible feeling. And we know that our heart rate goes up and maybe our hands start to sweat. And then we feel the emotion of fear or stress or confusion or frustration. What's going on this highway? So a physiological theory would say that our bodies create our emotions. Those physical cues cause us then to feel afraid or to feel stressed. A neurological theory would be that the neurotransmitters, changes in levels of, for instance, serotonin or dopamine in our brains, maybe the concept of adrenaline can cause our emotions to change. And then the cognitive theory is that our thoughts dictate our emotions, which then dictate our behaviors. So this will sound familiar to you when you think about cognitive behavior therapy. That's where that cognitive part is, because CBT, a very popular approach, cognitive behavior therapy in the field, says that thoughts drive feelings or emotions, which drive actions. So when I think I'm never going to get my work done, I'm failing. That causes me to feel discouraged, frustrated, hopeless, and my actions then will be to put on the TV and pop some popcorn and fall asleep and just give up. So that's an example of the cognitive theory, and that obviously could go in the other direction as well. This is a popular theory. This is actually 2 different theorists who developed this together. This would be that the emotions occur because of the involuntary physical reactions. And this is James Lang theory. So this is what I had just talked about. The example is that the stimulus is presented to us. And in this picture here, it's something on a movie in a movie theater. So maybe something we see or hear, a song that comes on, for instance, and a body change occurs, and then our emotions are activated. This is old. You can see it's from the late 1800s. And then the Cannon-Bard theory came along. And this was in the early 1900s, contradicting that James Lange theory. And the Cannon-Bard theory, which was two different theorists collaborating to develop this, stated that the emotions come first as a mental or psychological reaction to a stimulus. So when we see somebody, for instance, somebody that we might be interested in or attracted to, we might develop an emotion like excitement or happiness, or maybe some nervousness. And then the body would react to that with maybe clammy hands or some shaking. So it's backwards from what we just talked about. It's that when we have the stimulus, it could be the person or the car slamming the brakes or whatever it may be, the emotional movie we're watching, we have the emotion in reaction, and that causes body reactions. Finally, this final theory this is the mid 1900s. So this is called the two-factor theory. And this would be experience of physiological arousal that we then would label. Okay, so the example here, I said the bear thing. This is the stimulus causing that arousal. And then we're saying, this scares me. So we're getting that response. We're deciding in our minds what's happening, and then we get the emotion. So from our bodies, we move into the cognition component, and there comes the emotional response. One of the last theories to think about as we wrap up today is the Lazarus Theory. You might like this one too. And I want you to think about which rings the most true for you this week, okay, as you encounter different stimuli and encounter emotions. So the Lazarus Theory is that when we encounter something, we have a thought about it, and then immediately our physical reaction and our emotional reactions occur at the same time. So the example provided here is we're walking in the dark, we hear a noise, and we think, so there's a cognitive part, stimulus, thought, somebody's going to hurt me, somebody might rob me. And then at the same time in the Lazarus Theory, our emotional reaction, which could be fear, and our body reactions come into play. So we suddenly feel afraid and start shaking. It's not like, oh, we feel afraid and think about being afraid, and then we start shaking, or the shaking causes us to feel afraid. It's these two things happening at the same time, and that's the Lazarus Theory. So the idea is that our thought about the stimulus is going to produce this reaction for us. Facial feedback theory, the last one to look at, is that facial expressions impact our emotions. Kind of weird, you guys. I don't know. But this is the idea that what we do with our face causes us to develop internal emotions. This would be the concept of fake it till you make it. So have you ever, if you're entering an interview or something like that, have you ever been told, just keep smiling? Or if you're doing a performance on stage or something like that, show that happy body language and the energy will follow. The positive thoughts and feelings and that good experience will follow. That would be this theory. What we do with our face then translates to our emotional experience. So as we conclude today, because I want to be respectful of your time, would anybody like to share regarding which theory they might like the most or align with the most? What did you find interesting, anybody?
I think the last theory that we discussed, the facial feedback theory, was interesting because it definitely lends validity to fake it till you make it.
Totally. Thanks, Isaac. Yeah. Kind of weird. So if you feel stressed or scared or low or frustrated, I'm not saying be fake, you guys. Like, authenticity is very important, of course. But if you're in a situation, for instance, in school or in the workplace where you need to be composed and in a good place, try the facial feedback theory and try showing a positive and upbeat expression and see if it impacts your emotional state. So there's a little informal homework. You don't have to turn anything in. But that is the gist of it for today. Just wanted to hit on those topics for emotion, and you'll be seeing them coming down the line. Think about your abstracts, think about your final paper topic and what might be most interesting to you. Feel free to bounce something off of me via email if you choose, and I will look forward to seeing you all next time.